Jake from the wrestling team. You said on the media call earlier in the week that some plans we had to change for Stadium Stampede due to circumstances out of your control. What were your plans that you had when it was going to be 6-on-6?
Well, I would have loved to have had Ray Phoenix involved in the match, and that wasn't possible. And I had different plans for the match without getting it exactly. The changes we made worked perfectly, and I think it was a great night. And given the circumstances, it was the perfect audible, but it did have to make some adjustments based on some of the circumstances this week. And I actually never said it was the Stadium Stampede that would be changing. I said there would be changes on the card, and there were, both the Stadium Stampede and the Coffin match, for different reasons, but good reasons in both cases. So I did end up making a couple changes this week, and I thought the card came out strong. It was the best card, in my personal opinion, that we'd ever put together, and it was our most successful show. But it was a challenging week, and we did have to make some changes to plans. But Ray Phoenix was involved in our plans, and at one point, I also really was hoping to have Pat involved. And I think that would have made a lot of sense with a lot of the things we filmed. And going back to Death Before Dishonor, it was an amazing show. I would have loved to have had Pac as a part of it. I would have loved to have had Jamie Hayter as a part of it, two of the top homegrown British stars in AEW, maybe the top homegrown British male star and the top homegrown female British star. Now, it's maybe not fair to say Pac homegrown because he wrestled on TV, so before I get out of the gate, I guess I think about it. He has been with us since day one. He was at the very first thing we ever did. He's part of the original AEW, but to be fair, Pac had established himself on a worldwide level and was probably pretty well known, so I'd understand if you didn't consider him a homegrown star, but he's definitely a day one star. And two people that have been with us since 2019, the first year of the company, that were both great British stars that I was hoping to have involved tonight, and both great former champions in AEW, to have, you know, the former All-Atlantic champion and trios champion Pac and the former women's world champion Jamie Hayter. They were a big part of my original plans for the show, absolutely. Also, Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I would have loved to have had him, but I think the show was so amazing, and that's what's great about having a great team, is even when there's injuries in sports, people step up, and we saw that, whether it was changing the Stadium Stampede, or Christian Cage stepping in to the Great Coffin match, or a lot of the other changes we made along the way. It worked out. It was like a perfect storm of great pro wrestling, and it felt like a perfect night. And then we have something to look forward to as well, because we're coming back here next year, and I don't know what's to come in the next year, but I'm very optimistic that hopefully all three of them, Bryan Danielson and Pac and Jamie Hayter, would all be here next year, in addition to so many of the great stars you saw. So that's something cool we have to look forward to August 25th, 2024. And there were other changes that happened along the way too, but the bulk of tonight's show, and really the thread of tonight's show and the story, was stuff we wanted to do for a long time. So I think the spirit of tonight's show was perfect, but definitely some changes throughout the week. Like I said, the Stadium Stampede this week and the Coffin match, obviously on Wednesday in particular. But also, I think it made for a great show on Wednesday. I really felt very strong on the Wednesday show. It's hard to do a really good go-home show, to cover that many bases on a show like this. And some things we did cover on Collision. In some ways, I think having Collision made it possible to do more great go-home storytelling, because there were some great segments, I thought, across both shows. Instead of having to pack everything into Dynamite and Rampage, really all three things had great wrestling. And we've had a lot of success. You know, the launch of Collision, the ratings have been strong. It's helped us really build our international numbers. And Rampage, doing some really good numbers. I haven't said these numbers out loud anywhere, but this month, Rampage is up 97% in the UK year over year on ITV. On ITV1, it is up 97% year over year. That is tremendous. I'll have more numbers to come out later this week, but we're having an amazing year on ITV. This week's Rampage, this past week's, was actually the highest rated episode of the entire year on ITV. Our reach is up huge, so I understand John Williams and the great people at ITV will have more viewership numbers that I'll be able to pass on to the media about what we've done here to grow the brand, but that's part of why I feel very comfortable saying that we've come here. It's the first time I've said it today, but I have been saying it a lot in the media, that I feel that AEW is the #1 company in the UK. Now we've done the #1 paid attendance in the history of pro wrestling. It was right here in the UK, and we're doing great numbers on ITV, thanks to the great fans. And I'm very excited to talk about this show also being available down the line to watch on ITV4, which I think is pretty cool. Thank you for asking.
Markus Grunnemann with Headlock in Germany. When you initially announced All In, you talked about it would be in conjunction with a 100-year celebration of Warner Brothers. And a lot of people speculated that it either would be on Max and streaming, maybe be a free television special. Now you chose to go the PPV route. And as a follow-up question, both WWE and UFC basically sold their pay-per-view businesses to major media companies. So would that be something that you'd be interested in also doing in the future? And you talked about possibly increasing the number of pay-per-views as well, so maybe you can give us an update on that.
What a great question. Thank you. You've set me up for so many great things. Now being an international fan, and I see Dave asking for the microphone. Dave would be probably as one of the leading experts on pro wrestling business and on sports business. Also, this is an area of expertise, Dave, where you could dwarf what I know about it. As I understand it, the UFC and WWE pay-per-view models, even though they both work with a major media provider, those are very different models as far as how the pay-per-views are distributed, right?
Yeah. The UFC, it's still on pay-per-view, but ESPN purchased the business and still sells it as a pay-per-view, and actually a high-price pay-per-view. It's like $80 plus.
Right.
Plus a subscription. And then WWE is not like an added pay-per-view, it's just on Peacock, and you get it with the Peacock subscription.
Right.
So, but both companies got a lot of money. I think one was 175 and the other was 200 million. So yeah, if you get that deal, Tony, just get that deal.
Well, I would love to put something together. It's a great question. I think that establishes there are multiple different models for a company to deliver their pay-per-view events or their premium live events or whatever you want to call them through a streaming network. We've been talking a lot and having great conversations with the top executives at Warner Brothers Discovery, and there's been a lot of interest since the merger in AEW from the very beginning. And when Discovery joined Warner Brothers, when the top Discovery executives came in as our new bosses, it was a really exciting day, and they've paid more attention to AEW than we have really since the very first year. It's really cool for us, and I've had a lot of great conversations with the people at Max about what we can do in the future, not only for the home of these top AEW events, shows like All In, the biggest night in the history of pro wrestling, and like our shows we've been doing for years, like All Out, Double or Nothing, Full Gear, Revolution, and now Forbidden Door. Those are our top events. We're going to continue with those events, and you've set me up for a huge announcement that I was really looking forward to make. I think everybody has had access to this, although you might not know that it has been announced. September 30th, that Saturday Night Collision will be taking place at Seattle at Climate Pledge Arena. What has not been announced, and what I was really looking forward to talking about, and I'm so glad you set me up so I didn't have to bring it up out of nowhere, it was October 1st last year that Mr. Antonio Inoki passed away. I don't believe I would be in this position had he not done so many of the great things he did. And I think New Japan Pro Wrestling carried the torch for strong style pro wrestling for the top junior heavyweight wrestlers, and so many of the top stars in AEW and ROH have wrestled in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and now New Japan Pro Wrestling is a great partner to us. And I was devastated last year when Mr. Inoki passed. I did not know Antonio Inoki at all, but I really looked up to him. He was a hero of mine. And I took note of it, and that date, October 1st, has stuck with me. We are coming up next weekend with All Out, and you asked me about doing more pay-per-view events, more big shows, and I can announce here for the first time that on October 1st at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, it will be the first ever Wrestle Dream. Wrestle Dream, 1 year anniversary of the passing of wrestling's greatest dreamer. And I thought it would be very fitting. And after All Out, you won't have to wait for Full Gear in November. Speaking of Full Gear, I guess I can confirm what I've seen in the media. I don't know how you all found out, but people seem to find out, I can confirm that this year, Full Gear will take place November 19th.
November 18th.
November 18th, excuse me, because of the Saturday, excuse me, that's right, thank you, Saturday, November 18th, because the Jaguars are November 19th, that's right. So Saturday, November 18th, it'll go back to Saturday pay-per-views, will be Sunday, October 1st, and Full Gear, we will continue the Saturday night tradition, thank you, Raph. It'll be Saturday night, November 18th, we will be in Los Angeles at the Forum for Full Gear. And very excited to go back to the Forum where we've had some of the greatest nights in AEW. We've done 2 of our best episodes of Dynamite, I think, last year and this year at the Forum. And it'll be great to make our pay-per-view debut in one of the biggest markets for Full Gear. But like I said, you don't have to wait for Full Gear for us to return to pay-per-view after All Out. I'm very excited about Wrestle Dream. It's going to be a great show. There'll be a lot of people interested. What I have planned for Seattle, I have great plans for Seattle. October 1st, we'll be there again Saturday night, September 30th at the Climate Pledge Arena for Collision. That's been announced, and now I can officially announce to you, and I've been planning to announce to you, Wrestle Dream. It's something I'm very excited about, and I've wanted to do for a year now, and I think it's very fitting that we pay tribute to Mr. Inoki. I first saw the stars in New Japan Pro Wrestling when I was 7 years old, watching WCW. And now for us to be the home of pro wrestling on TBS and TNT, and also here on ITV, which carried WCW at that time when a lot of the great stars in New Japan Pro Wrestling were in WCW. And I feel like when WCW went away, there were things that got lost, there were things that are missing from the wrestling business. And there's something we've been able to bring back, a competition, a balance. I don't know exactly how to put it, but there was something missing from the world of pro wrestling for the last 22 years. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but it is that spirit of competition. And today we've created real competition. Nobody can take this away from us. The numbers are real, we can verify them. I'll hold it up against any show in history. We had 81,035 paid tickets sold today, and I'll put it up against any crowd in the history of the business, and I think that's very cool. So we've hit new heights that even our predecessors in this legacy, because a lot of the things we've been fortunate to do, whether it's wrestling on TBS, TNT, ITV, these great channels, and being partners with New Japan Pro Wrestling, sending wrestlers to the Tokyo Dome, bringing in the top stars from New Japan, even some of the same people. I mean, we've had, Yuji Nagata on Dynamite competing for championships. It's pretty cool. And I thought it would be very fitting to go to Seattle for that show, October 1st, and I'm very excited to announce the first ever AEW Wrestle Dream in Seattle, October 1st. Thank you, what a great question.
Just following up on that, I
Thanks.
had another question, but when you say Wrestle Dream and tribute to Inoki, does that mean, I'm taking that to mean you probably have a lot of New Japan people on the show.
I'm hopeful. I've talked to them about it, and I think they want to participate in the show and send people, and they're very supportive of it, and that I want to do something for him, and I think we have a great business relationship, so it would make sense, and I do think they are very supportive of the event, and I think everybody was happy that I wanted to do something to pay tribute to his legacy here in America, because I think there's a lot of American wrestling fans who were introduced to top stars, a lot of Japanese stars, but even lucha stars and some of the top American stars that were established through Mr. Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling promotion. It's amazing how many of the biggest names today and of all time, they came through Mr. Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling, and New Japan Pro Wrestling is very supportive of the event, so I do expect them to participate in it, and we'll have our top stars involved too.
So just as far as tonight's show, what was the final gate, and have you got any kind of early figures on pay-per-view?
Pay-per-view is tremendous. It's going to be our biggest pay-per-view in well over a year, and one of our biggest of all time. It's up there with our biggest pay-per-views, and that's really exciting. And you don't always get a lot of second chances in life, and this is a true statement that I've said to a lot of people. And there are a few people around here, I feel like for the entire company, we were in such a hot place at one point, And I'll never forget, looking back, we had this great night at the Forum last summer. But by the time it was over, we were in a really challenging position. And I talked to people about it a little bit, but like when that week started, we had Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, and Adam Cole all healthy, and MJF was an active part of the roster. And by the end of that week, 3 of those people were injured and MJF had walked out. And Adam Cole in particular, I was really worried about. And MJF walked off the show at the Forum, and it was a pretty crazy moment. And the summer was challenging, and tonight, the show is as good as it ever has been. AEW was better than it's ever been, and it was our biggest night. You don't get a lot of second chances in life to get back when you get that hot, that red hot. And I always wanted one more shot, and I felt like tonight was our chance to get as hot as we've ever been, and I think we are. And for Adam Cole was red hot when he came in 2 years ago next week. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't until this summer and everything that built into today, and Adam Cole, against anything everybody would have told you even just a few months ago, walked into the Wembley Stadium hotter than he's ever been. And several months ago, people didn't even know Adam Cole was ever going to wrestle again. And if you told somebody Adam Cole was going to walk into the show on August 27th hotter than he's ever been, that would be quite a fucking feat, ladies and gentlemen. Because Adam Cole's been really fucking hot before. And he was completely out of the wrestling business. And he had to come in, start from scratch, and work his way back up to the top. And for Adam Cole to be as hot as he's ever been, that's pretty special. And then the Acclaimed. The Acclaimed have had the crowd behind them for a while. They had an organic support. And I thought tonight could be their biggest moment. There'd be this great moment, the world's biggest scissor party. I was really excited for them. And for them, it was a second chance to get as hot as they've been and have as big a moment as they've had. And they've been incredibly hot. So in so many ways, for so many people, it felt like a second chance. And then for Saraya to come in here and think she's never going to wrestle again, and to think her biggest shows, her best days in wrestling are behind her. And she came into AEW and I don't think she knew what to expect. And it's been quite a journey and it's been quite a year, but for it to end up here, when she wasn't sure she was ever going to wrestle again, you don't get a lot of second chances like that in life. MJF walking out of the show, MJF putting me in a challenging position in public, and then to come back under scrutiny, to come back under challenging circumstances. Next week marks 1 year since he came back, and again, he's hotter than he's ever been. And that is a testament to him, it's a testament to Adam Cole, and it's a testament to everyone at AEW and the wrestling fans. But there are so many examples on this show where it's amazing. It's a redemption. There aren't a lot of second chances in life. And to have that many people have a shot at redemption and pull it off tonight, it was redemption for a bunch of us. And it's the greatest night of my life in the pro wrestling business. And I'm just really grateful to everybody who's made it possible. I know it seemed like a crazy idea when we announced this, and there were a lot of people questioning it, but it's been the best thing we've ever done, and I'm very excited about it. Hey.
Hi Tony, what's the crack?
Hey.
Jay Hunter, OSW Review here. First of all, congratulations on all your success, not just tonight, it's an incredible night, and just with AEW in general. You have such an infectious enthusiasm for pro wrestling. Like, you go back, way back with the ECW Arena and the Jericho signs and that. But I was just wondering, like, wrestling is full of like snake oil salesmen from you, you know? How, and you've done so well in pro wrestling. How do you protect yourself from pro wrestling?
I think by becoming a force in pro wrestling, and also I think I've made some moves from the beginning that helped us. Like, I had so many people, when I announced my intentions to people in the business that I wanted to get into wrestling, everybody was coming out of the woodwork trying to sell me their wrestling company. I didn't want to buy them. and I wanted to start something special with AEW. We changed the market, and in doing so, a wrestling company that had been in business for over 20 years in Ring of Honor had to reevaluate, and they were no longer able to stay in business the way things stood, and I was really proud that I was able to take a company that had a great history, that had at one point, I believe, been the #2 wrestling promotion in the world, wasn't anymore, and bring it to special heights, and to have the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championship tonight defended in front of the largest paid crowd in history. I don't think anybody would have expected that a few years ago. And to have the Ring of Honor World Champion competing on such a card, it's unthinkable. And there were a lot of companies that were in a very different place several years ago. I don't think New Japan Pro Wrestling was a big fan of AEW or mine personally when we launched this promotion, but I'm also an honest person, and I tell it like it is, and they know that now, and that's part of how we built this great relationship. I think they watched what we did and built a reputation for honesty and straightforwardness and good intentions. And after a couple years, really just a couple years, I think it made all the sense in the world for New Japan Pro Wrestling to reevaluate things and choose AEW as their new partner. And in that time, the landscape has changed very, very much. So I've just tried to navigate the business, utilizing things I learned in sports, because connections I've made in the world of football, Premier League football with my friend over here, and the NFL. I've learned a lot about the sports business. Also, I own one of the largest sports analytics engineering companies and work with dozens of partners across multiple sports and media properties. So I've had a lot of experience in the sports business, and I love pro wrestling and studying the history of pro wrestling. And nobody gets it right all the time. I certainly don't get it right all the time. I've just tried to use my judgment, my understanding of wrestling history, and everything I've learned in sports. Thanks. Hey.
Two more questions for Tony. Go over here.
Oh yeah, hey Sean.
Hey, Tony, you announced Wrestle Dream and Full Gear. How does that affect the schedule for Collision? Are those preempted, rescheduled, moved to another night?
Well, Wrestle Dream is on a Sunday. There's Collision on Saturday night.
Okay, yeah.
And it actually, the Full Gear will be still on Saturday. We'll have Collision. I think we're planning to do Collision on Friday, actually, at the Forum, is the plan, I believe. Yeah. And so that'll be a big Friday. So we've got 2 nights at the Forum, Friday night and Saturday night coming up in November. And as for the Seattle Collision, that's already announced for Saturday, September 30th, and then Saturday, September 30th, and then just now I announced Sunday, October 1st, which coincidentally is the date the Jaguars are here. So I will not be.
More questions for Tony.
Just in terms of next year's All In show, I think fans would love to see Dynamite, Collision, Rampage, not just a week-long UK wrestling event. I don't know if that's in your sights immediately, but maybe down the line. And then if you had to pinpoint some international pay-per-view stadium shows, what countries would you like to target in 3 to 4 years' time?
It's a great question. I can't say as far as stadiums and other markets because it's such a huge swing when you do it, and I'm not ready to make that aggressive of a leap yet, honestly, at promising another stadium show until we come back here 1 year from now, August 25th, for All In next summer, next bank holiday, August weekend, here at Wembley Stadium. But that's a great question. And then what was the first part of your question?
Just in terms of potentially making it like an all-week wrestling event in the UK, you could do Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision all in the UK, because we're greedy like that. We want it all.
I think it's a great idea. I don't want to change what made this weekend so special, but I think it's a great idea. I didn't think it would be appropriate for this week because I really felt strongly that the debut of AEW in London, the debut of AEW in the UK, and the debut of AEW in Europe should be here tonight. This had to be the first show. A lot of people ask me about putting Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision in the UK or in Europe ahead of this event, logistically might have made sense in some ways, except for the fact that I believe a huge part of the milestone and the energy of tonight was that it was the first time ever, and that was pretty special. But there's only one first time, so admittedly that wouldn't be as much of a concern next year, so I would consider it, but I can't commit to that yet. But it's certainly a good thought, and it wouldn't have the exact same obstacle I had this year. That's a great question. I will do one more, and then I will go.
Last question, final question.
But you got a pretty good one in now, so we'll get two more. I have to do somebody that didn't get one. But yeah, you had a very good question. What is it?
Thank you. Our listeners have been pestering me to ask this. So, when can we expect? Doesn't have to be a big stadium show, but when can we expect AW in Germany or in mainland Europe? And also, can you talk a little bit about how happy you are with the ratings in Germany on BMAX, which is part of the WBD family, and maybe an update on if we can get Collision on in Germany on television as well.
Well, Collision coming out, and really it was TNT that asked for Collision, and we delivered. And what it's done, it's created demand in many markets, over 100 markets, with AEW in over 150 countries now. There's tons of places that want Collision. And one thing that it's done, to answer your last question first, it's really helped our streaming business internationally. AEW Plus has gone through the roof, and this is our biggest year yet. We've had huge growth, and I think a big part of it has been adding Collision in a number of countries. The ratings in Germany, very exciting. Discovery, very excited about that part of the business, and in our partnership with them, I think that's been a great step, having the TV there in Germany, and it is something we've talked about. Now that is a great market. The NFL, as I've aforementioned, National Football League, and another place I work. By the way, that's a big deal that I'm not going to be here October 1st, because we've had about 200 games with the Jaguars since my family took over the team. This will only be out of 200, the fourth one I haven't been at. And all of them were because of either AEW or Fulham, and there was one where I had COVID. And several years ago. So I always have a good reason if I'm not at a Jag game. And there's only been a couple times ever. And I've never missed one in Jacksonville ever. And hopefully never will. So for Germany, that's one of the best markets in all sports. NFL is having huge success there right now, and we're very involved in the international committees on international presentations of the NFL, and obviously the Jaguars play in Europe every year here at Wembley Stadium, and this year we're also playing an away match at Tottenham. NFL is having a big presence in Germany and a lot of success. We're finding it's a great market. It's also a great market for AEW and live event touring. I think that has a lot of potential, and we've had a lot of questions about great markets here for pro wrestling, including Mexico and Puerto Rico, Chile. I would add Germany to that list and say that it is definitely one of the best markets in the world to go to, in addition to some of the ones we've talked about here. That would make a lot of sense. Now, it is something to think about, because I do think there were a lot of German fans here. I've already talked to a lot of the German fans here, fans from all over the world this week, from other countries. Our friend from Italy over here, and people all over came to see this show from all over Europe, all over the world. So that is something to think about. But definitely Germany would be a great option. And then, was there anything else to that question? I think that I get all three of your three parts.
I think so, yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. My pleasure. Great stuff. And I will do one more, and this is the last one, because the great PR team wants me to go so they can go to the after party.
Lyrics Women's Wrestling Talk. Congratulations on an awesome show tonight. One of the things that was noticeable from the All In card that was missing was there was only one women's match. Obviously, before it was a callback to the original All In. But there were some stars that were noticeably missing, like Athena, Willow Nightingale, Chris Statlander. Can we expect more women's matches to be on the All Out card and on future pay-per-view cards going forward?
Well, we've announced Ruby versus Chris Statlander for the TBS Championship. We'll have to see what kind of condition Saray is in coming out of this match. It's a great question. A lot of the card tonight was both featuring as many of the top stars in AEW as I could get, so a lot of the biggest stars in the company were not on this show, and that's why we have big matches like Miro versus Powerhouse Hobbs, and obviously Ruby Soho versus Chris Statlander next week. I think the pacing of the show tonight was probably the best we've ever had, the best show we've ever done. So to add more, I think would have been challenging, but also we have so many great stars across both the men's and women's division, great wrestlers. I think the card in many ways was, I tried to pace it perfectly, and I think we did pretty great. One thing I would note, and you said it yourself, a lot of the card was paying homage to the original All In. The four-way match, Dr. Britt Baker participated on the original All In, and that was the key women's match on the original show. And Madison Rain pointed that out in her commentary as well, that she was also in that original four-way, and Dr. Britt Baker participated. I had the Golden Elite in a trios match, kind of a callback to the original All In, and definitely there were a lot of top stars, men and women, I was hoping to get on tonight's card, and there were a lot of people that wanted to be on the show, and I hope we can continue to get all the top stars in, but also I want to pace the shows and be able to have great matches without having to rush through. So I was really excited about the card, and also very happy for Soraya. That was a great moment, and I would love to try and get some of those top stars in All Out and also next year's All In. I think you mentioned some great names, and those would be great names for the show. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to close out. I've mentioned some of the statistics, but I can't stress it enough. This was the biggest paid attendance in the history of pro wrestling on the planet. All of you were a part of making that happen. And most of you are here as unbiased journalists, but I know all of you at some point have been a wrestling fan. And even though you're not here to give favoritism or coverage, I do hope you can all appreciate that all of you were a big part of history tonight and saw something really special and historic and noteworthy and newsworthy. So when you're covering this, I hope you can take a moment to sit back and reflect on the fact that pro wrestling is an art form that has been practiced for over 100 years all over this planet, and in recorded history, nobody can ever find an example of more people paying to come to a pro wrestling show than this one. That is an amazing achievement, especially for a company that is a startup company, a challenger brand. And I'm very proud of that, but I'm also really grateful. And I always say this, a lot of you have been to the Scrums before, but I really appreciate all of you. And I know a lot of you traveled a long way to be here. I tried to answer as many questions as possible from everybody here. And man, what a night, what an honor to be a part of this. And I hope to see some of you next week at All Out. And if I don't see you next week at All Out, I certainly hope to see every single one of you next year right back here in the same room a year from now, August 25th at Wembley Stadium next year for All In. Thank you very much.